Anthony Albanese calls recent actions in Gaza completely indefensible. Good on you, Albanese. Anthony Albanese calls recent actions in Gaza completely indefensible. All right, Albo, let's see what you have to say.
Australia isn't a central player in the Middle East, but what we can do is continue to do what we have done, which is to take a principled position. We opposed unequivocally the atrocity that occurred on October 7. We have called for ceasefire consistently. We've called for the release of hostages. We've also called for the aid to be able to flow to the people of Gaza, and we've called out Israel for its actions that have led, of course, to such appalling conditions and loss of innocent life. In the resolution that was carried in the Parliament just days after.
I think it's really, 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 really hard for Albanese to stand up to Israel, like even pushing back on Israel slightly. He has Trump like going off at him, like Trump's Israel's little attack dog, and it's like, well, no, we're allowed to condemn human rights atrocities. Like, it's absolute insanity. Matterhorn says, hi, Panda Elbow Knees, oh no. Panda Elbow Knees. Okay.
Parliament just days after October 7, I think, will stand the history of well. Because when you look at that, at the time we spoke about opposing the loss of innocent life, whether it be Israeli or Palestinian.
With respect, things have escalated. We're now seeing Palestinians regularly killed while waiting for food and water. Do we need to start changing our view of what's happening in Israel?
Well, that is completely indefensible, and we've called that out each and every time that has occurred, and we have.
I think if all of America's allies get together and and coordinate, and at the same time expel all Israeli diplomatic stuff from their country, I think that's sending a strong message without, doing anything too extreme, because that is like the most extreme thing you can do without getting violent, right? Is to say, we're expelling you. Like, it's just the strongest thing you can do diplomatically. Just send all their embassy staff home, all their consulate staff home. Off you go. Hop on a plane back to Israel, and don't come back until you learn how to keep your arms and legs to yourself. That would be the dream. Yeah. Well, look, I think Canada and the UK and Australia and New Zealand and everybody have been on the back channels talking about it. I think they probably are coordinating some kind of joint venture, because this is the type of thing that's going to leave stains on the histories of all of our countries that sat back and didn't do anything while this was happening. And I definitely don't think Israel is going to be able to play the Holocaust card anymore after this, because you don't get to commit a genocide just because one was committed against you. It doesn't give you a free pass. So the Israeli government have been war criminals for decades. Why does everyone decide to care now all of a sudden? I think Matterhorn, I think a big part of it is citizen journalists and a lot of people not getting their media from the mainstream news, and actually people being able to see the carnage in Gaza, and especially dead children. I think even the most apolitical, apathetic person sees dead children, and unless you're a sociopath, right, you're going to have a very visceral, very raw, very emotional reaction to that. And I think it's affecting people that normally didn't really care, because a lot of people don't have any knowledge of history or geopolitics, or even, what the Palestinian-Israel conflicts are about, the history of that region, any of like the way Israeli society is, tiered with, Israeli citizens having more rights than anybody else living there. And it's essentially, textbook apartheid. People don't even have, the average person doesn't even have that. But, because so many pro-Palestinian activists, I guess, online activists, have just been flooding everybody's social media feeds with images and facts about what's happening there. I think people have woken up. I know a lot of people that aren't politically conscious at all that have been asking me about it, that have wanted to ask me more about the history of it, and what's going on, and what can we do, and what can I do to help, who wouldn't have known what Palestine was or have heard about Gaza or the West Bank before this conflict kicked off on the 7th of October. So I think that's what it is, honestly, is people actually being confronted with the images. And it was like when the Vietnam War happened, right? It was the first time that we really saw anti-war activists out on the street. And it was because it was the first time that images of war were contemporaneously getting into the newspapers, right? People were able to see, not in real time, but, you know, within sort of days of things happening in Vietnam, we were able to see what was happening and just what a senseless waste of life it was. And I think it's kind of a similar phenomenon to what's happening now. Yeah, well, that's my take on it anyway.
And I've issued a number of joint statements, for example, with the Canadian and New Zealand Prime Ministers. We've joined the international community, which overwhelmingly has condemned actions such as that. And the other thing that we've done is to say in private what we say publicly as well, which is that Israel, and we say this as a friend, sometimes you've got to be straight and upfront. And I certainly have said to, for example, President Herzog, who I've known for a long period of time, that Israel is losing support by its own actions, and that some of its actions are completely indefensible.
In your John Curtin oration recently, you seem to recast the beginning of the US relationship in different terms to the way we've thought about it until now, really focusing on, you know, it as a statement of Australian independence, which obviously has a particular context at the moment. The story that appeared this week about Elbridge Colby and war and Taiwan and submarines, it suggests a certain level of presumption in the US about the relationship with Australia, doesn't it?
We, of course, are a sovereign nation. And John Curtin...
Thank you. We are a sovereign nation, and we do have the right to self-determination, and we aren't beholden to America in any way. You know, if anything, our allyship, if that's what you want to call it, with the US actually puts a target on our back. If we were able to build stronger, friendlier relationships with our neighbors, we are in Asia. You know, we are in the Asian region. Our closest neighbor is Indonesia. I would like for us to be friends with our neighbors. I would really, really, really like that. But, you know, America having, you know, one of the main bases that they use for the triangulation of their weapon systems, of their long-range weapon systems, will always mean that Australia has a target on its back. And if we never entered the coalition of the dickheads, or the coalition of the willing, if you want to use the nomenclature of the American empire, do you think we would ever have a problem with our very well assimilated, well integrated Islamic community? We wouldn't have seen any, and you know, we had way less than any of the other Western countries, but we would never have seen like the Lint siege. We would never have seen, I think it was Burke Street Mall, where there was like a car attack. We would never have seen that, any of that, because, you know, I personally, I grew up in a very Islamic part of Sydney, of Western Sydney, and everyone just got along. Like it was never an issue. I was just like, oh, when I go over to these people's house, like, you know, obviously there's no bacon and there's, you know, blah, 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 blah. And you just learn to, like, you know, have halal food around for your friends when they come over. And it's, you know, it's really wasn't that big of a deal. And then, you know, when everything kicked off, it started to affect the social cohesion of our country, because why were we getting involved with that? There were no weapons of mass destruction. There never were. And that was another thing Bibi Netanyahu did, right? He goaded America into the invasion of Iraq. He goaded them into toppling all the regimes that have been toppled since 2003. It's just perpetual war for what? And Australia shouldn't be involved with any of it. We have no reason to be involved with any of it. We are so far away. We are so culturally far away. I think Americans have this idea in their heads that, oh, Australians, they're just like us, but a little bit different. And I don't think that could be farther from the truth. I don't think it could be farther from the truth at all. Okay, we speak English. We both speak English. And that's about it. There are Christian churches in Gaza, so Christians are killed also. Nobody is saying anything about this. Oh yeah, some of the oldest churches in the world are in Gaza, 100%. Yeah, there are Christians in the West Bank and there are Christians in Gaza. There 100% are. Of course there are. People forget, like in Syria, especially, like where obviously Bashar al-Assad has just been deposed, I guess is the word the Americans would use. Christians and a small Jewish population, Christians, a small Jewish population, and Muslims, for the most part, you know, got along in a cohesive society. And I wonder now that America's gotten rid of al-Assad finally, I wonder how it's going over there. I guess it's probably not going great. You think Bush Jr. really wanted control of the oil in Iraq and the opium in Afghanistan? Oh, 100%. That's gotta be George W.'s dream, you know, just being off his tits on opiates while he because he's Texan, right? Aren't they all about oil? Aren't they all about that black? Don't they call it Texas gold? Don't they call oil Texas gold? Like colloquially? I believe they do. Yeah, I can just imagine. Now I'm just imagining George W. Bush rolling around in like oil off his tits on like Vicodin or something. Or like just smoking some opium straight from the poppy, you know, straight in like a Chinese style opium pipe, rolling around in oil. Yeah, that's a sight for sore eyes. I wouldn't be surprised if Jeffrey Epstein has a painting of that actually, or a videotape. He could be part of the files that are missing.
He chose to stand up to the British and assert Australia's right to defend ourselves and to bring home our troops was an assertion of that. And he looked to America, of course, was an important part of that as well. Now, since then, the US alliance that was formalised some years later, but essentially can be seen as beginning there in the heat of the Second World War. The US alliance has been our most important. It remains our most important alliance. That is a critical relationship that we have for our defence and security, but that doesn't abrogate the need for Australia to have a say in our own defence and security relationships.
Australians really haven't had much of a chance to debate AUKUS because it was signed and both sides agreed to it. Can you assure us that it did not come with any pre-commitments to US actions? I'm not talking just about Taiwan, but to what extent does it lock us into military actions by the United States? Well,
Australia is a sovereign nation and governments of the day make decisions on behalf of the Australian government, and certainly I cannot envisage a circumstance where an Australian government would give up that sovereignty. Now, I note in recent days most of the coalition have said that that's the case. Angus Taylor has said something different, and it's up to them to really clarify exactly what their position is.